I think that's why the arts are so important, and to be able to imagine different futures. Is imagination. I think we're entering an era in which imagination is being killed little by little, and it's very dangerous. I think we need to kind of get a hold of it and don't let it go, because it's what is going to get us out of trouble, you know, imagining a different world, being capable of imagining. I forgot to ask you both. How did you find out about my work? I'm curious.
I found you because of my work.
Oh.
I did research about the overview effect for my work.
Yes.
And then I found your exhibition.
Do you remember which one was that one? Or was it just like installation?
It was about the new colonists.
Yeah.
Okay. And I found that interesting that we both came to this subject from a totally different aspect.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Interesting. Oh, that's good. I saw your posts on space, cats in space.
Oh yeah.
I like it.
That's completely other thing.
Yeah. But I like the humor of it. It's really, really nice. It's refreshing, you know?
Yeah, I love this. This project has turned from a completely brain fart into an, I don't know, it's now 4 years in a row we made a calendar with it.
Yeah.
And it's like selling like 5,000 pieces a year, and it's
I
everywhere.
believe you.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I believe you. It's really good though.
And it was just like,
yeah.
Me and a colleague in the studies, we had this one course where we should do a photo book.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? And I saw all these memes in the internet with cats in space, like these really bad like GIFs with Photoshop, just like completely trashed. And I was like, so let's do this, but in amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun. Yeah.
So Monica, do you want to share your screen? I don't know if you can.
I will. Yes. Let me see. Yes, I can. Brilliant.
Awesome.
Let me go here. And then maybe I go.
How do you pronounce your last name?
So the foreign friendly way of pronouncing it would be Alcazar-Duarte. And the Mexican.
And the non-friendly?
Well, the Mexican way would have accent on the second A, so it would be Alcazar-Duarte, just a little bit more vowel strong. But you know, I'm very kind of flexible about it, so I don't demand that you pronounce it exactly the way it should be. As long as you get them both, it's absolutely fine for me. So yeah, you tell me when. Do you want to start? Should I start like?
Sure, just get started.
Yes. Well, you found me through the overview effect. This is one of the themes that I've been covering since 2014. I started working on this project about space exploration, and one of the main reasons I started was because I was in a dinner party, and friends mentioned the Mars One project in the Netherlands. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's about if there was an open call and they wanted people to go to Mars in a one-way trip ticket. And while all of my friends were like really surprised about why would anyone want to go and leave the Earth and never come back, I remember being really struck by having that conversation in itself and thinking that I always imagined that was a conversation either from a sci-fi movie or something that I would never see in my lifetime. And there we were having it. And so it really stayed with me. And I started making research, about the Mars One mission and so on. And I got a little grant that allowed me to get in touch with 6 of the scientists in the UK who were shortlisted for the Mars One mission. And I started following them and asking questions and seeing what they were working about, all of them really young, super clever, some of them in their second PhD, studying astrophysics or black holes. I mean, they wouldn't be your typical eccentric that you would see in the media advertise. Oh, look at these crazy people. These are the ones I want to go to Mars. It would be completely the opposite. And suddenly I realized that really what was going on, it was that in reality, it was more like a social experiment that they were being part of. And they were really spokespeople for placing the idea of colonizing Mars in the future, not in 2030, maybe not even in 2035 or 2040, but they were somehow recruiting the space scientists and the space engineers of the future. They were going to little primary schools around the country and talking with children and getting them excited and inspired about space exploration. And so that kind of was unexpected for me, I guess. For about a year, I followed them and took different photographs. And at the same time, I was trying to gain access to European Space Agency. And for one reason or another, I couldn't get the access. But through one of these scientists, I met someone who was doing research in a habitat, kind of analog habitat in Poland. And they were connected to the European Space Agency. And through them, I got introduced to the PR people, the people who are in charge. And then they invited me to go and take some photos from the facilities in there. The facilities are absolutely incredible. You know, they are like places like this one, which is a Mars yard, in which they test the robots that they have sent on the land rover and so on. And the detail on the terrain is absolutely amazing. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I think I was very interested in the very human side of science. Coming from a Latin American country in which things are never quite working perfectly, I think I'm very used to value processes that do not present you very clean-cut answers. I'm very fascinated by error, for example. And we embrace it pretty much as part of the culture. So I was very interested in the human side of all these endeavors, you know. And throughout it all, I remember thinking, trying not to be seduced, which is very difficult, by the extraordinary technological devices that I was exposed to in the European Space Agency, and the creativity and the intelligence and so on, yeah. But try to find the more human side to it. And I guess
I feel you on that one. Sorry, but I really feel you on that one, because whenever I was at NASA or ESA or whatever facility, yes. It looks like the entire place, it looks like straight out of Kubrick's 2000 and it's just Space Odyssey. It looks like in the movies, like it's so unnatural. Yeah. It's just like technical stuff, and you feel like it's completely other dimension. So I feel you on that one. But what I find really interesting that these people were like promoting the idea of space exploration in like schools and things, because I think, do you think there's a need for that? Do you think we as a species some kind of like lost this drive to get out of space? I often ask myself that.
I think they put Mars in the collective mind back into the map. And all of a sudden, throughout the next year or so, I would say 2017, 2018, there were a lot of films that came out. Touching Interstellar was one, The Martian was another.
Yeah.
There are another two. And I noticed that because it was almost like it was floating in the earth of the contemporary culture, you know, and popular culture. And I thought that was really interesting. On one hand side, I think there is a huge economy developing via private corporations who are injecting the money to do this. And that's another thing that I discovered through the research, that at the moment, the law frame, or the frame of law that we have, was developed right after the Second World War, when, you know, America and Russia entered this called war and kind of race who was going to get first to the moon as a way of demonstrating their power. And the space law that was developed then was thinking in terms of countries. So no country would ever, could land in the moon and declare that a certain territory was theirs. The space was for all of humanity, but this framework of law never considered that it was going to be corporate money, the one that was going to really push forward the new space race. And so as such, there's a need for this framework to be developed properly, because there are issues like ecology or human health, human rights issues of the astronauts that are going to be sent that are not completely regulated at the moment. And anyone can do whatever they want and can declare and do and exploit however they want and however they like it. And at the time when I started doing this, it really sounded like crazy. Like whenever I would talk about these issues back in 2016, people would look at me thinking, this is a space, this is really unreal. Why are you even losing your time on this? It's too crazy. And just within the last 2 years and over the pandemic, Elon Musk has launched all these little satellites, right? Because he's convinced that we need internet all over the world for some reason, that everyone should have internet access, no matter where you are. And so he's creating the first artificial constellation. And at the moment, the impact of this artificial constellation is not grave. It's just kind of messes the work of some astronomers, in being able to look at the stars and study the stars properly, because he's kind of interfering with that. But I think he plans to launch, I don't know, quite like a large amount of them. I would say somewhere I read close to 2,000 of these little satellites. And these satellites, he claims that they are going to last 10 years, 15 years. But then after that, what happens? They become space junk. And what is going to happen with all this space junk just floating around the Earth? I mean, there are so many issues that it's almost like we don't learn, and we are continuing to do exactly the same mistakes outside of the Earth orbit.
And I was just gonna say that. Like it's just expanding our mistakes out of the Earth.
And what I find really interesting is, like, within this mythology, there is no mention of using this technology to solve the problems that we have right now here on Earth, for example. So on another hand side, I met scientists that said, space exploration is needed because it teaches you about our planet, no? We learn about Earth and we learn about the history. And for example, the moon, if we go into the surface of the moon, we can understand better why water ceased to exist there, or Mars is the same. And then maybe that can help us to avoid that happening on the Earth, Exploration is necessary. There's another part of scientists that are saying that this is to save humanity. And that's another part of the argument that I find the hubris of it, in terms of instead of like focusing on what we have here right now, we're already thinking in 200 years time, 300 years time. And so the work, the way it developed was that after a year following the scientists and being in the European Space Agency, I felt like in my soul the need of looking back at Earth. I felt that it was way, even though I focused on the human side of science and the human questions that involve exploration, there was something else that was missing, and that had to do with Earth, and not forgetting about what we have here right now, and this philosophy of progress, and eternal growth that I saw consistently reflected in this mythology through these corporations that want to go to Mars and beyond. And so then I found 3 places on Earth that are called Mars. And one of them is in Pennsylvania in the US. And I had still a little bit of money from my fellowship, and I just bought a ticket and went there. And it's super down-to-earth place, it's a truck town. And I think the name comes because the first mayor of the place, his wife was an astronomer, and she loved the stars. And so he decided to call the place Mars. And so then, being America, you have Mars pizza and the Mars laundry and so on. There are little alien figurines everywhere, glow in the dark kind of things and like that. But as soon as I started taking the pictures, it's almost like this place became a metaphor for life on Earth itself. And I started thinking of all these other images of the scientists wanting to leave Earth and going to Mars, while I was already there in Mars, photographing the magic of everyday life and the mundanity, the magic of mundanity and the small and so on. So somehow this narrative started building up of like, why would we want to go to Mars if we have Mars on Earth? But also, and I'm super pro science, I'm like super dorky and nerdy. So I'm not against discovery or exploration or knowledge or anything like that. I think it's more like the corporate side of it, that the longer I develop this work, the more I start questioning, and I see really urgent questions that are not being explored culturally, and it's more, I think, for the next generations, which are the ones who are going to live with this almost aspiration of, we can go somewhere else, we can replicate life somewhere else as we have it here. And I think that's a gap that needs to be widened. And it's like, no, we cannot replicate it. It has taken millions of years for the ecosystems to develop the way they have developed, so we can thrive the way we do it today, right? So that's how more or less the work kept on developing. And so now I keep on working on it since 2014. And I ended up making a space trilogy just to make reference to, sci-fi narratives. I use the language of sci-fi, and I use that kind of very Western way of representing technology, like the perfect packaged conclusions, as a point of entry to open these other questions that I'm mentioning, that are related to the more boring stuff, with law. How do you even start talking about law in an exciting way, or ecology, which is very overwhelming, or human rights and so on. So in this photo, that's how I ended up using augmented reality, because I thought I want to develop a visual language of what I cannot see, but also I want to attract younger audiences to these themes. And I want them to suddenly encounter this mythology that they think already is very well positioned in their minds, who the actors are and how it plays out. But then they suddenly start thinking about nature and earth and evolution and life and other issues, So the second chapter of the trilogy is called Ascension, and it refers, it's a little bit focusing on that same notion of terraforming. So Ascension Island is an island in the South Atlantic Ocean, and through this Charles Darwin passed in front of it on his voyage to the Galapagos Islands. And at the time, Ascension Island, it was mainly a volcanic place, and he saw it and he thought, why not? It's a perfect place to make an experiment. So he convinced the Royal Navy, and he convinced Kew Gardens. He had a friend, a botanical scientist in Kew Gardens, to ship to the island flora and fauna over a period of 12 or 15 years. I can't remember exactly, but it's more than a decade. And so then they changed the ecosystem, and now the island has 3 different ecosystems. And of course, local species disappeared and never came back. And now is a very, very strange place, Ascension, because you have ESA, You have NASA in there. They observe satellites from these places. They have this island. They have observatories. The locals, they are not nationals of any country, so they are almost like visitors to the island. But you have to ask also permission from Her Royal Majesty the Queen here in England to visit it. So it's quite a strange and interesting place in itself. And I'm using it as a metaphor for that idea of terraforming, because I read in an article somewhere that Ascension Island was used as an example of what could be achieved in Mars one day. And then again, I thought, no, it's very different, you know? And if
like it's strange. Sorry, it's strange. It's strange, like in that sense that you have to ask the British government to get there, and there are no locals. Like it's all backflashing what you said at the beginning, like the issues of no country can own a planet or whatever. It's all like backflashing for me. So many interesting things.
It's very multi-layered.
Yeah.
But you see, this is the thing. I'm just one person, so I speak about these things from the little strands that I have focused on, and I'm always hoping that also other people and other artists find other little strands that they find interesting, and they pick up on that, and then they develop work on that. Because then, what I think we need is like different voices abording these kind of issues from different perspectives. So, for example, I haven't covered completely anything about Ascension Island and the politics of it regarding NASA and ESA, but I find it fascinating in itself. So the second chapter is very kind of metaphoric in that way. And again, I use these images from the shiny technology and shiny science that I saw in the European Space Agency and these habitats that I visited. And I use augmented reality to reveal these other animals that are preserved, you know, like in a museum. These are in a museum here in London, a zoological museum in London, that actually holds some of Charles Darwin's writings. That's how I got in touch with them. That was my first guide to get in touch with them. And then I discovered that they have this room full with species of different animals in jars. And I started just taking pictures of those animals that I knew they took to Ascension Island. And then that expanded into like 20, 25 animals that I photographed. So the idea is that almost you see European Space Agency or a space that looks like from a sci-fi movie, and you use the augmented reality, and then behind it is this species. And so it's almost like asking the question, would these spaceships become like a Noah Ark of the future? And if they do, they will take life not as life as we know it, they will take it just as DNA, almost like dead life, you know? So it's kind of making the link, because in a way, I think that part of exploring beyond our planet is this fear of disappearing. It's kind of fulfilling the fear of disappearing one day, right? And I'm somehow closing the gap with, well, but if we take life somewhere else, it wouldn't be life as we know it now. So it's always coming back to this idea of what we have here right now. This is it. And this is what we need to fight for. It's not the far future. It's not the distant planet. It's what we have right now here. That is precious. So this comes to the third chapter. And for this one, I'm using Mayan cosmology, and I'm kind of linking it again with images that I found on a beach here in the UK that look like Mars, but they are just in the beach. So it's almost like Mars on the beach. And I'm linking it with notions of beekeeping, just because I'll show you in a minute, but I have part of the sculptures when I exhibit the work, I have a little Petri dish that is full with bees that I collected from a bee farm. And the bees are floating. And they kind of connect with some circular light boxes that I show as part of the exhibition, because the Petri dish is circular and they're like floating around and they're like just kind of rotating. And the visual connection that you have is like this kind of fragility of the beast, right? And the beast being at the center of the ecological balance. And them being just there contained in a Petri dish, dead already. You know, it's almost like, again, touching on those greater themes of infinity and death and life and so on. And this third chapter then is a film, and I can show a little video that I prepared for you guys, if I find it. Here it is. Okay. So let me just double check. So back, yeah.
Nimo yewaklali pano petlatl uani claclachia no cuentla tsin sa secacate newamonica mikasan no mawitzotzin.
So the idea behind this third chapter and the film behind it is to keep on encountering, I keep on encountering notions of decolonial thought, right? Because of the summer of 2020 and the dialogues and conversations that started happening around that. But I see a lack of thinking of indigenous culture as parallel or on the same footing as Western culture. I see indigenous knowledge being seen as something of the past. And then I discovered that English is considered to be the language of science, and in a way considered to be then the language of the future. And so through my research for this, I'm starting to question that. What happened if we start talking about these issues that are very Western, such as space exploration, from an indigenous perspective? And if we put them on an equal footing, does something interesting come about that we haven't seen yet? Are there any answers that we can find that are different towards our relationship with nature and ecology and discovery and knowledge? Can we talk about something that is not so hierarchical, but is much more horizontal, in which the human beings are not at the top of the pyramid, or are just as equal as everything else? And if that is the case, then that humility and that repositioning, would that give us a different attitude towards our position in the universe and the world? So these are the questions that are on a more philosophical kind of way that I'm aborting, or that I'm like focusing on for this third chapter. And so the film that I just showed you is a 3-channel installation. And constantly there's something that comes and goes between the bees and Mars on the beach and the rockets leaving Earth, and then the ecological crisis in which we find ourselves in, right? But also the beauty of the amazing beauty of what we have, and the recontextualization of a term such as abundance, in which you realize that we have enough, and what we have is more than enough to thrive. We don't need more. And to keep on thinking of eternal growth as a symbol of progress has got us in the problems that we are today. So it's questioning these ideas that I see that are floating around. So I see we have 7 minutes left.
I find that question, like that thought experiment, like I find it fascinating. Like I read a book a while ago. It's called *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*.
Yes. Yes.
And there I discovered that it's really like a phenomenon, the phenomenon of speed and growth, and like the obsession with it. It's not really like old. Not far ago, it was like normal to think that the good times are in the past or at the moment, and it was not feasible that the future would be greater than now. So I find it interesting when you think about it, that now we have this growth like system all built up with capitalism and the agricultural revolution, and everything is growing. And what would have happened if we changed that? Like, and how do we change it? Like, what would the world look like if we don't need to grow? Like, I think this is like it's in my head, but I have no idea how to articulate it.
I think maybe the definition of growth has changed. I mean, you think of money and making more and more and more and consuming. But if you think of growth and just change the meaning of growth, what about growing as human species, growing as humans, as nations, as ideas? And I think many things we invent in the future is more about being better at something, or just being interested really in stuff, and not just, oh, can I make money with it? Get I funding? Can I sustain a life if I do this or that? But more of exploring ourselves, like exploring space. It's more exploring our inner workings and healing. And I mean, we all need to heal from anything, and just teaching and playing again, and just get rid of all the pressure of being something, because we already are something. And maybe just things get more relaxed and maybe even more efficient at the end, instead of just working 8 hours, 7 days a week, and all this crazy hustle culture bullshit. It's just it's insane. Just few people can really withstand this kind of hustle culture, and many people just struggle to even figure out what they want in life. So I think if you just change the meaning of the words, like if you change the historical perspective of what is now, I think this is maybe what we need, really. And like, this is really the fact that you just look at Earth from outer space, that you really change the thought pattern.
I think one of the things for me that really moved me to keep on talking about these issues is the ecology at the center, and how it's still, the dialogue still happens very much within a Western context. But the countries that are in the midst of this crisis are not in the West. There are countries like Mexico or Pakistan or Bangladesh and so on, who are really seeing the effects now of the climate crisis. So in a way, it's also kind of questioning that. When are we going to include these other voices in the conversation? Because these are the voices that are experiencing it now, and they are most likely to have some kind of solution to the problems that they are living. But nevertheless, the center of power of the dialogue, of the storytelling, of the production of these images is still very Western. So I'm also kind of trying to kind of question that, like, at what moment are we going to start leading towards a recognition of there are other cultures that do have knowledge that is quite current, that maybe not exactly on the point of the vocabulary that were used in the West, but nevertheless, they are just as relevant and just as poignant and just as current, if not more. So in that sense, is this question for me of encountering the concept of abundance in indigenous cultures such as Hawaii, such as the Mayan culture, and being in London, for 20 years, how my mind has shifted up to the point of thinking of abundance of something that you have more, and that's what abundance means. And suddenly realizing that the way they see abundance is just opening your eyes to what you already have, and realizing that you don't need more. It's already there. All of what you need is already there. And I thought for me that was the shift, the moment in which I thought, wow, there's a philosophy towards the achievement and towards that is measured in completely different terms. Because I saw it I kind of recognized it in myself, and it really kind of shifted my view on things. So yeah. Productivity, efficiency, all these things that we see completely, mirrored in social media as well, and the languages of social media, and how the boundaries between work and leisure have also like kind of completely blurred, and you're still working when you're in social media, but you're supposed to kind of, but it's work. I feel this work. It's not fun. I'm not having fun anymore, on this. And is it, yeah.
That was beautiful what you just said. And that's like finding value in the things we have at the moment, and realizing that this is the thing, because that is like the fascination I have, or I discovered in the overview effect, because like the gist of this effect is that you find that you look back at something, what you have, and finding new or greater value in it. Like that's the fascination for me. Like all these astronauts, they're like sent out of space to find something new and explore, but all they talk about is Earth. Like all they talk about is they're looking back at what we like experience every day in our life, and that this is in fact the eye-opening experience they have. So like it was for you in your
because
work.
They see how unfriendly space is. They see how barren of life is. They see how there's nothing there. There's nothing. It's like what was the name of this astronaut that went beautiful desolation on or magnificent desolation on the moon? As soon as they landed and they got out of the Apollo 11, he looked at it all and he just went, this is magnificent desolation, because there was nothing. And then you look back at Earth and you realize how fragile it is, and how alone we are, and how unique it is what we have, how almost magical and sacred even, it is. How unique and wonderful. And then, you see all of life happening at the same time. I mean, some of them even talk about how time itself, the concept of time and relativity, just becomes really clear, because they are looking at the same moment. They're looking the day before, the day of today, and the day of tomorrow. They're looking all these different human experiences of time. They're looking at it happening at the same moment for them. And so I think for me is that, and I think there's another Mexican astronaut, I can't remember, Mexican-American astronaut, that he's very on ecology, and he's an advocate of ecology, and he talks about the atmosphere of the Earth and how he will never forget how thin this layer is of separating life on Earth from nothing, from nothing. I think is that, and look, I digged out this little video of the bee. If you want, I can show you.
Sure.
How it works. So he's using the same. It's a children's actually toy, where they put like a shining earth, and you can get it online, but we adapted it, and so we put the disc with the magnet, and underneath the light box there's another magnetic force that makes the magnet then start to kind of just go around and around. But I think is that moment of realizing the fragility of it that I wanted to capture. And so at the time I looked at this documentary talking about the bees, And then I looked at researching how Mayans looked at the bees and how since then they knew how sacred bees were and they considered them completely sacred. And then how they connected it to the planet Venus. And, and so then I just kind of integrated it into the work. So this is another version of it, of the bee sculpture. And then I don't know if you can see, but in the back there's a reflection of one of the European Space Agency's anechoic chamber just back here, because that's the way I presented. I presented with the circular light boxes and then the bee bubble. And yeah, that's it.
Why did you choose the bees? Because of the ancient meaning that it's sacred, or has it something to do with the problems we face today, with all the bees dying, all the insects dying? So, what's your connection?
I think originally it was because of the contemporary problems that we're seeing with bees and how we're not protecting them.
Yeah.
And then they kept on staying in my head, and I started making this other film, and I found, how things happen sometimes that are completely random. So I was walking in this beach and I found these landscapes that look like Mars, and I shot them, I took a video of it. And then we were ready to go in the car and drive back to London. This is last year in the summer. And all of a sudden there's this massive heather field, and it was full with bees. As we're walking, we can hear the bees going zzz, and it's massive. And look, it's like my skin just like, so we started filming them, my partner and I, with our phones. And then suddenly I discovered the magnitude of it, but still it's like a little patch in the beach. So I decided to go back to the bees on the film and talk about them, and then connect them to my own heritage in Mexico, because of the questions that I was mentioning before, of the importance of starting to look at other bodies of knowledge that had been downplayed, as a way of finding different answers and different methods of finding our position on Earth, and our position towards nature and our attitude towards nature and so on. So it kind of, I think everything stays in your mind, and then throughout the years you start seeing more connections and you start developing and going deeper into the work. And I think this is the case with the bees. As things pass, and you become older, and then you start seeing different points that you haven't covered, and then they come back and manifest themselves in a different way, I think.
I think it's sometimes really important to really have time to do this kind of work, because obviously new information comes in, and as you get older, you change perspectives, you get calmer inside.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think in the interview you mentioned COVID like breaking, like a break for us, like getting slower and like really look at things. Do you think, I mean, it seems like COVID is maybe nearing some kind of end. Do you think really COVID did change something for humanity, or just for your work? How did things change, or how did it change your perspective, like how you work, how you see things?
It allowed me to slow down without feeling guilty.
But why do we feel guilty if we're slower?
Because,
why is it?
Yeah, because you feel the pressure. It's very difficult, I think, to and I've always, like, for example, this body of work, I decided early on that I wanted to develop it into a longer period of time. So that's why I made the new colonists, and then I started Ascension, because I realized that, as you're saying, technology changes, and then as technology changes, your position towards it also changes. Perhaps at the beginning you're like super excited about social media, and then like 1 year afterwards you're like, oh, this is a nightmare. I'm addicted, and I really actually don't like it that much. And then more knowledge about it comes out, and it turns out that, for example, Instagram is very bad for children's self-esteem, and then you realize, oh, wow, what I was feeling on one level actually is manifesting in another way. And so you learn about yourself and your position towards these things as you go. I think because change is happening and developments are happening so quickly, we are having trouble catching up with it ethically and emotionally and so on. So that's why I decided this is long. This is long, and I want to see if we really are going to go to Mars before I die. And if that happens, if I can have a saying in the conversation or not, So I want to keep the work going for a longer period of time. That on one hand side. But on the other hand side, you feel the pressure of people saying, well, so what's next? And what is the next work? And what's it? And me saying, I don't know, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. And I'm still working on it. And then the pandemic hits, and it allows then a certain space for reflection, and allows a certain space for saying, okay, I'm going to pause on this and then see what happens. And this is how I start developing this other film, like out of nowhere, out of a response of that slow process of digesting, being all of a sudden in a world where the pandemic hits and we are all like, now what? How are we going to, we can't keep on going the same way. And you see that we're trying really hard to keep on going the same way because it's easier. I think it's Slavoj Žižek who says it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, right? We can somehow picture it better in so many films and so many popular culture than I haven't seen a single film that talks about the end of capitalism as we know it. Right? It's always like a capitalism.
I mean, we had a guest, I don't know, like 3 episodes ago, and we talked about like sometimes we just need a little crack in our reality just to stop and really look at reality and really stop whatever we're doing, just stop and get into this mode of wandering and asking again like a little child and really try to play instead of being ego-driven and just being in this perspective of that's things were, that's how things are done, like always. Just ask yourself, okay, what if I change just a little bit in this direction, or if I just do this a little bit different, what would change? Or what, just this what if questions should pop up more often, I think. And I think that's the greatest place for creativity is uncertainty, or a bit of uncertainty. Too much uncertainty just makes you anxious. But if you have a challenge to refigure the information points again, to reform reality, then there's this play mode, I call it, of state of flow maybe. And I think if we're just too fast, the quality of our work just suffers. And I'm also a huge fan of working long on a project and just don't feel ashamed if you just do nothing. I mean, I do music and I do a photography series and Google Street View. And sometimes I just don't do anything for months and I feel really bad. And then I'm just like, why do I feel bad? Maybe I'm just collecting, but I don't collect activity, not the active state of mind, but just passively. Yeah. And then sometimes it just breaks free and I'm working month after month and just doing my projects. Yeah. And yeah, it's the connection between feeling ashamed that you don't post anything on Instagram or something. Yeah. And I really stopped. I just posted today another photography and I was like, it doesn't really matter. It's just, I do it for myself and I just want to explore by creating art. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge in these days, like TikTok, like OnlyFans, like all this toxicity about the new tech medias. It's pretty hard to stay around it for me.
It's efficiency. The trick of being efficient. I think you're better than me because I can't stop. I'm like very active.
I think I'm just good at procrastinating. I think so. I don't think it's neither bad or good. I wish I would work harder, but sometimes I just get diffused.
Yes. I don't think there's not right or wrong way of making work, is it? I think each one finds its own way and it's almost like quieting the neuroses and the questions, I guess, is also a different way of doing it. It's interesting. I think for me that there's a whole book about the breaking point of leisure and work and that overlapping of it. I read it like 6 years ago, and I think for me that was the point of connecting, like, oh, look at that. I mean, how seamlessly we transitioned from this to that, and how easily we thought it was fun, how easily we were sold the idea that it was fun, and we went for it. And here we are selling ourselves every day, right? By our own accord, producing data so we can be better studied and be better measured. How do we react to certain things and not on other things? How do we actually respond to advertising, mainly to business models, right? Because this is what is at the center of these corporations right now, leading social media and so on.
But you said something else about the COVID pause, which was really interesting for me, that the state of mourning is like important for us these days. So that we realize that we are not in control of nature, and that maybe it's not there for us to conquer it, and that this kind of period is important for us to realize and mourn over that. But I wonder if that has happened. So now life slowly starting to get the normal ways. I think I don't see. I'm not seeing a huge shift in like a mindset. Or do you guys see that?
I think it's there, but it's very difficult to imagine. I think that's why the arts are so important, and to be able to imagine different futures. It's imagination. I think we're entering an era in which imagination is being killed little by little, and it's very dangerous. I think we need to kind of get a hold of it and don't let it go, because it's what is going to get us out of trouble, imagining a different world, being capable of imagining a different model, a different way of doing things. I think it's there, and I think everyone is really hungry for it, but because the system works so smoothly, we're still running and walking with it, and we're still going along with it. But I think the need inside all of us for something different is very clear. I see it with friends, I see it with people. I see it with people not wanting to go back to offices in the same model, even finance people that I have known and have had conversations, they're just like, I don't want to keep on having Zoom meetings at 7 a.m. in my house. I want a 4-day week urgently if we are going to keep on doing that. And I think it's there. If anything, I was reading Timothy Morton, Ecology Without Nature. And I'm sure I don't understand all of it, but at the center, I think, and I've heard him talking, in Central San Martin's, he gave a talk about 4 months ago, very interesting talk. And one of the things he says is that nature is not this neatly packaged romantic concept of our horizon in which there's no chaos. Nature is like everywhere, everything, and it's ongoing, and we're not in control of it. So if we would kind of get rid of that old-fashioned notion of nature as a pretty picture that is there to be either conquered or drawn or position ourselves as part of it in balance with it, as soon as we erase that, we would realize that, that one, we are not in control. Nature is a magnificent force that we're just like kind of part of. And we have never been in balance with it. There's chaos. And we have found ways of organizing that chaos as a way of calming our neuroses. But if we would see the force of nature for the brutality that it has, then I think he thinks that we would surrender a little bit more into finding different ways of doing things, rather than keep on insisting on controlling it and saying, oh, well, we can plant clouds one day in the sky as they did in the Vietnam War to have rain if we need it, or we can do this and that again to kind of control the weather on Earth. And these crazy ideas that you suddenly hear scientists talking about, but they're serious about it. And they're thinking, we will have the science and the technology to get us out of these problems and to get us out of trouble. Let's think about it later when it comes. And I think that's what is quite contested for me. It's like, no, it's not going to get us out of trouble. Why are we still believing that? Why are we still believing that we will have control over these things and that we will develop the technology to do this, to manage to control these things? We won't.
It sounds really like we're pretty much narcissistic and we're gaslighting ourselves the whole time. It's like we all know we got this huge problem of climate change, that wars just sucks and that always the little people die. And that many things are really, really broken in this world. And if you keep going this way, we just destroy ourselves. But we're still so blindfolded to the idea we need to stay inside the system and we can't escape the system. But if you think about it, we are the system. If like in Germany, if everyone, like 80 or 90% would just not go to work for one day, the whole system would break. And we have to figure out to reestablish a new way of thinking. But we're so in this concept of ego-driven, like generations and generations of we need to work, we need to do this, we have to keep it this way and getting controlled by politicians and stuff. But it just takes maybe a day or a week just doing nothing and everything would collapse. And so many people think they don't actually are in power, but if you just go to the supermarket and instead buying cheap meat and instead buy an apple, and everyone would do it, then the whole market has to change. Because they want to earn money. We could manipulate everything just by making the right choice for maybe a couple of weeks. But we're just so, I don't know why we are this way. I mean, are we so used to how we live? Are we just, do we really need all this crisis to wake up? Or do we need more crisis because we don't wake up? It's just, sometimes I mean, right now I don't work and I'm trying to get back into being part of a workforce. But I look at all these jobs and I'm like, I'm not really interested in doing delivery jobs and putting my life on the line and the traffic just to get someone else's pizza. Or I don't want to sit around and just, don't know, just type something and just being part of something that's just bores me all the time.
Life is too short for that.
Yeah, but also I have the pressure like, but I need to work. I need to be part of a system because then I don't have any value in my social class and besides my friends who are all working, trying to get anywhere. But sometimes I ask myself, why I'm not driven? What's wrong with me? Why I'm not driven to make care to make it big or something? Instead, I just want to learn myself. I just learn about myself. How do I function? How can I heal? I want to learn about other people and interests. I want to do art, music, photography, but I'm not really interested in making money. I don't know why. It would be nice to have money, but I'm not really interested. And I really think something's pretty wrong with me, but I don't know why I'm thinking
it's wrong. Why do you think it's wrong?
I don't know, because everyone else is doing this whole crazy stuff, like doing all this stuff, and no one really knows why we're even doing it.
But it's about making value in different places, isn't it? It's like, how is the scale, the value scale? What do you value? And if everything is just material stuff, and you don't see the value on other stuff, like just having a wonderful meal that you made with, or just looking at the sky, I don't know. It's just a question of what is of value. I think that is different, but I wouldn't say it's wrong. It's just different.
Yeah, it just feels wrong because everyone got, well, I don't even think everyone got this plan, but everyone's like studying, doing work, like getting better and just climbing the ladder higher and higher. But I don't see any sense in it. Like if you're not interested really, like if you're not really into what you're doing, I don't really, for me it's not making any sense. What's it for? Why are you doing this? You just sure there's jobs that need to be done and stuff. I really get it, but they're so devalued. Like we got this crisis in our hospitals. Like all the staff in the hospitals are so underpaid and under pressure since COVID, and we knew it before COVID, and nothing changes. And these people just leaving these jobs, and we really heading into a crisis with open eyes. Nothing changes, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't get this world anymore.
Yeah, I think it's interesting times. May you live in interesting times, they say, but I think it's just way too interesting for me. It's getting a little bit intense. I don't have answers. I think it's just living through it and truly getting involved and doing the best you can with what you have in the moment that you are, and not claiming to have answers, complete and absolute answers, but also, I mean, I know I have friends who make fun of this, of having questions, but I think it's so important to have constantly questions about things, not doubts. Doubt is different. It's to have questions regarding of how are we going to get there, or how are we going to do this better? How are we going to become more enlightened? Are we going to place value again in human life, or is it all about having cities full with technology and, I don't know, buildings and buildings? I see it in London. Who's going to live in these buildings? Who's going to afford these buildings while the local people are being pushed out of a house where they live for 15, 25 years? You know, I think I don't have the answers, but it's about asking the questions about these things and trying to find the answers, I think, and the methods of improving.
Yeah, I think so too. And sorry.
Yes.
I think so too, and I think it's important that you ask the questions why you have these questions, Sebastian. Like when you say that you wonder why you only have these questions, why is something wrong with me? I think that's where you should go. Like discover why you think that and what's behind that.
Yeah, I'm already working on that. It's just a really private topic for me right now, as of in therapy and stuff. And I'm really like digging into why do I think about work this way, and maybe it's just because part of my trauma and stuff. And if you're traumatized, you see things differently, and everything has an emotional connotation to it. So it's not really easy to see the things as they are, because everything is just like clouded and sometimes not really clear. And sometimes you just try to think of something, but it's just, you don't have a really image stuck in your head. It's just all like looking at clouds. It's just constantly reforming, and there's new things, and you just can't figure out what you're looking at right now. It's just really, really hard. But also really interesting because of that, I have a really different look sometimes on things, especially on emotional things, and get better connections sometimes. But I still don't know how to make money out of it, so I just still try to figure it out.
Maybe you don't need to make money out of something.
Yeah, but I wish I had more money. That's the thing. I just want to. Sometimes money makes things easier, but sometimes having too much money makes things more difficult again. I just want to be in the middle of it.
What you just said, is one interesting thing I wanted to ask Monica about her work, with the images we have, and we can't make them translate them into work. But when I started my work in the science and space related theme, there was, at the very beginning, there was the question how to visualize something which you can't really see, which you can't really, I can't go out of space and take pictures of some exoplanet or whatever. So that was the first question I had confronted me. And then I started to, like, kind of like you, Monica, I started to like explore the places on Earth, which make science about these questions I had. But that was quickly, I realized that this is not the way. I need to create my own pictures and my own representation of this, of these things. Like, and I'm interested in, like, you visited these places and then you started to incorporate like augmented reality and sculpturing things, and with these hovering things. Like, I wonder what's the thought process behind that. Did you discover the same problem I had, like with the science facilities and stuff like that?
Yes, definitely. And uppermost because I wanted to talk about space law and space ecology, right? And so then how do you talk about these boring, or subjects that are considered boring, but that nevertheless are really important and are going to affect us all eventually, right? And so I think I research quite a lot, and I remain very open throughout years. And I think everything kind of stores in my brain. And so a lot of sci-fi movies and games came to my mind. And that's how I thought maybe I can do 3D animations with a friend of mine, and I cannot go to Mars, but then I can visualize Mars and have it as a 3D animation that comes to life from a photograph. And by doing that, then maybe what I'm doing is like acknowledging the limits of the photograph and the frame of what is not included, right, in a photograph, acknowledge that and use it as a way of saying, okay, so this is what actually is behind that image that makes us look at this image in the way that we look at it now, and contextualizes it in the way that we look at it and interpret it and give it meaning today. But then there's also this other stuff that has informed it that we don't talk about, such as the radiation on Mars, such as people who are going to go there, they will be under a contract, and quite possibly they will have no rights at all in their health, no? Basically, they're signing the rights of their own health just to go into these trips like experiments. Talking about the satellites, like all the international conflict possibilities that could happen if we don't have a more friendly way of developing the space law framework for these explorations to continue, because they're going to continue. And how do I speak about this? Well, I go and produce these really neat and almost game-like 3D models of these satellites. And then I talk about these things of how one is from China, one is from Russia, one is from Israel, one is from the US. These are the power forces that are behind it. But then I talk about Elon Musk and Virgin, and I talk about these other kind of space cowboys that are injecting the money into all of this. I thought gaming was a good entry point, just again because that's the language of the new generations, and because it kind of allows you to enter a fantasy, but also the blurring of visual languages. You know, it becomes like it opens the possibility of having a narrator over telling these things. So that's how I ended up interviewing Frank White, who developed the overview effect, and I interviewed Ian Crawford, who talks about space law. And so then it becomes almost like a little 3D animation film that you're looking at, that is not illustrating things, but is kind of opening questions for the audience of things that they are never included in these mythologies. So that was my entry point. And that's how I ended up being with augmented reality, because then you can activate it from the photograph, and then the photograph becomes almost kind of, it gets another layer that is not included in the 2D image. I can see we have 6 minutes left now.
It's so funny. Normally I just watch. No, but I watch the time every time, and now you're the first one who's like 6 minutes left.
I'm so sorry. It's
Just-
because I talk and talk and talk. And
No,
I don't
it's-
like
that's-
talking and all of the sudden go. It's a bit of an idea.
That's the concept of a show, because our guests can talk as long as they want, as long as it's just interesting and just
Yes.
getting all the stuff out. You just sometimes don't have the time to, because there's a theory in psychology. It's like as if you speak of something, you really figure it out. And we need language as a sort of map to really get the direction of where we are right now.
Yeah.
And talk, like self-talk is really healthy. It's not crazy, it's actually healthy. You're talking to yourself, because if you don't put it out, you just don't manifest it in language. And if you don't put it in language, you can't translate it, you can't interpret what you're thinking. So
yeah, it's elucidating ideas, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like elucidating ideas.
Yeah, sometimes you get the best ideas when you talk with someone, and then you're like, that's why I'm stuck with something, and then the other person wants to talk to you. You're no, just think. So yeah.
Yeah, but I like it. I mean, this is almost like slow talking. So it's almost like whoever is going to watch this, they're just going to kind of slip into a state of just listening to this rambling in the background or something. Yeah.
I think, Sebastian, you need to, what I get from the last 10 minutes, you need to do, you need to do some, I don't want to call it work, but you need to do art about work to uncover these fogs and stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting into cultural work. Maybe I'm going to study culture stuff. It's not easy to pinpoint it down, because studying is always like you're studying four things at the same time. But I'm really interested in working with artists and stuff, and just trying to translate these thoughts. And I don't know, but I'm really interested in just listening, and I love input. I'm just constantly, I'm just watching documentaries and just love to talk about new stuff I don't understand really, and just get the hang of it and really learn as fast as I can. Yeah. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe sometimes we earn some money with this. I don't know. So it would be really good.
I have one last question, which just came into my mind with the last topic we had. I don't know if I can frame it in 3 minutes, but do you guys think that the limits of photography or the limits of art, do you guys think that's the problem with us not seeing the problem, and that it's right in our face, like globally, but we don't see it? Is that a problem that we can't make it visible? Like, for example, like if you take photography, then the first images from outer space of the planet, like Blue Marvel and Earthrise, like I think it was 1968 and 72 or something like that. These were the first pictures of the whole world, and they sparked like a natural movement. They really like inspired a generation, and that was the first time. But do you think? And then there was, of course, Pale Blue Dot, but it's not like boom, that's it. We see it now. Is that because of the limits of the media or the medium, or is it just us? 1 minute 40 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's cultural. I think we have the narrative still is very based on the West, and the culture and science in the West is very based on all these issues that we've been covering throughout the talk. You know, I think images need to be varied and need to come from different voices and different ways of living and different points of view, and those voices are not present at the moment. We have a very tidy system of getting rid of the rubbish, for example, that we produce. And so if we would live with that rubbish instead of like getting rid of it and make it invisible, then maybe we could kind of fathom the scale of the amount of disposable things that we are just throwing away for no reason, and the amount of rubbish that we're producing without having to. I think it's cultural. I think there is a lack of variety in the story and the narrative, and the glance that is holding this narrative up to now is very aligned to a system of looking at things in a very neat way.
So
I
it's
think
here.
that's part of the problem.
It's here, it's already in us. It's like the overview effect. You just have to look back and realize it.
And look at all the other voices that are not being included, I insist. There are so many ways of looking and